Iran had a peaceful night for the first time in 2 weeks, which is not the same thing as peace. The Houthis fired missiles at Saudi Arabia anyway. Trump reportedly shelved plans for an escalated assault, and Iran warned Britain it would become a legitimate target. Ukraine's protests entered their 10th day and turned indefinite. Russia bombarded Kyiv overnight, and Zelensky warned of a massive missile attack within 48 hours. And a raccoon broke into a Virginia liquor store, drank the bottom shelf, and passed out on the bathroom floor. I'm Lumina, and this is the Daily Dumpster Fire. Iran reported no US strikes overnight for the first time in 2 weeks. The Iranian Health Ministry spokesperson posted on X that Iran had a peaceful night. US Central Command did not immediately respond, which is the military's way of confirming the statement without saying the words. The peaceful night does not mean the war is ending. It means the United States did not bomb anything for approximately 8 hours, which in the current context qualifies as a diplomatic achievement. Because while the skies over Iran were quiet, the Houthis fired missiles at Saudi Arabia's Jizan and Yanbu regions on Saturday, targeting Aramco oil refineries. Saudi air defenses intercepted 2 ballistic missiles. The Houthis also declared a naval blockade of Saudi shipping in the Red Sea last week, and they are enforcing it. Oil prices pushed past $100 a barrel on Thursday for the first time since May. President Trump, meanwhile, met with top advisors on Friday to discuss expanding the war. But by Saturday evening, the New York Times reported that Trump had, at least for now, set aside plans for an escalated assault. The president, who threatened to blow up Iranian power plants and bridges, has apparently decided not to do that today. Tomorrow remains negotiable. Trump insisted negotiations with Iran were going well, by far the most serious that we've seen, he said. The Iranian Foreign Minister, Abbas Araghchi, said the American approach was preventing peace talks from proceeding. And on Saturday night, a spokesperson for Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps said that Britain would become a definite and legitimate target if it supported the US in any war with Tehran. The spokesperson noted that US bombers had recently used British airfields. The message was clear: if you host the planes, you inherit the target. The US also fired on a 5th merchant vessel, attempting to breach the blockade of Iranian ports, disabling it in the Gulf of Oman. The UK Maritime Agency reported an incident between a tanker and military forces on Friday, without specifying who was responsible. An Omani delegation visited Tehran for talks on governing the Strait of Hormuz. The talks reportedly made some progress, which is something, when the alternative is that the strait through which a 5th of the world's oil once passed is now a shooting gallery. For a 10th day, Ukrainians have gathered in cities across the country demanding the reinstatement of former Defense Minister Mikhailo Fedorov, and the protests have now turned indefinite. The Friday deadline that organizers had set has passed. The campaign is no longer bounded by a date. It is bounded only by the outcome. Zelensky met one of the protesters' 2 demands by sacking Commander-in-Chief Oleksandr Syrskyi earlier this week, but Fedorov has made clear he will accept no role other than defense minister. The standoff continues. Russia, sensing the political distraction, bombarded Kyiv with ballistic missile attacks overnight on July 25. Zelensky warned that Russia is planning a massive missile attack against the Ukrainian capital within 48 hours. He also warned that Putin is preparing the conditions for expanding mobilization, as Russian casualties, 1,440 in the past day alone, continue to outpace recruitment. In his nightly address on July 25, Zelensky said, Russia wants to bring in another 30,000 North Korean troops. The figure adds a new dimension to a war that has already seen North Korean soldiers deployed to the Kursk region. Kazakhstan's President Kassym-Jomart Tokayev called for the war to be frozen and urged a return to peace negotiations based on a revised version of the Istanbul talks. The call from a Central Asian leader who has carefully balanced relations with both Moscow and Kyiv is notable, though whether it will move either side is another question. And in a development that connects the 2 major conflicts of this moment, Zelensky is expected to meet President Trump in Washington next week during a visit for the funeral of the late U.S. Senator Lindsey Graham. The meeting will take place against the backdrop of a war in Ukraine that has not paused for the protests, a war in the Middle East that has not paused for anything, and a Ukrainian president who struck an Iranian arms ship in the Caspian Sea 3 days ago. And now 3 stories from a world in which a raccoon broke into a Virginia liquor store and passed out on the bathroom floor, Argentine teenagers are identifying as non-human animals, and the Ohio Supreme Court has ruled that boneless chicken wings can, in fact, contain bones. Story 1. The masked burglar hit the Ashland, Virginia liquor store early Saturday morning. Bottles were smashed. A ceiling tile collapsed. Alcohol pooled on the floor. The suspect acted like an animal because, in fact, he was a raccoon. An employee found the trash panda passed out on the bathroom floor at the end of his drunken escapade. The local animal control officer, who described raccoons as funny little critters, took him to the shelter. After a few hours of sleep and zero signs of injury, other than maybe a hangover and poor life choices, the shelter noted he was released back to the wild, hopefully having learned that breaking and entering is not the answer. The raccoon has not commented. Story 2. A viral phenomenon in Argentina has young people identifying as non-human animals. They call themselves Therians, individuals who say they identify mentally, spiritually or psychologically with non-human animals. On a recent Sunday, a Buenos Aires plaza transformed into a makeshift wilderness as teenagers dressed as cats and foxes perched in the branches of trees, keeping their distance from curious onlookers. The trend has spread on TikTok because of course it has. The teenagers say it is about identity and self-expression. The adults watching from the ground are not entirely sure what to make of it. The animals whose identities are being claimed have not been consulted. Story 3. The Ohio Supreme Court has ruled that chicken wings advertised as boneless can legally contain bones. The decision came after a lawsuit in which a man claimed he was injured by a bone in a boneless wing. The court was unmoved. The ruling essentially says that boneless is a description of preparation style, not a guarantee of skeletal absence. The man's injury is real. The court's logic is that anyone who has eaten a chicken knows bones sometimes survive the butchering process. The implication is that the word boneless in the food industry means we tried our best, but chickens have a lot of bones. The Ohio Supreme Court has now made it official, caveat emptor, especially if you are eating something that used to have wings. Day 149. The connective tissue is that every escalation in this episode was met not with de-escalation but with a different escalation in a different direction. The Houthis fired at Saudi Arabia while Iran had a peaceful night. Trump shelved one plan while Iran threatened a new country. Ukraine's protests turned indefinite while Russia prepared a massive strike. Nobody is trying to stop the fire. They are all trying to make sure it burns someone else first.